All right, I'm here with a surprise guest. Do you count as a guest? A returning host once a year. And normally, I say for the last 2 years, we've done a kind of review of the first half of the season, but I think we're just going to do the Forest game this time because, in fact, it's a microcosm of our season.
Be very difficult to find anything to say about the season that you couldn't already say or couldn't also say about this Forest game.
No, the only thing really is we didn't have Onana chucking one in his own net. Poor attacking, a completely incoherent midfield. Tactics were a mess. Substitutes were awful. We couldn't defend. But at least Andre didn't let one in. Well, didn't let one in through his legs.
Yeah, it didn't let one in that you wouldn't expect it would be reasonable for a goalkeeper to let in.
Yeah.
Marcus Rashford scored, which is different to the rest of the season, to be fair.
That is. And very nice finish for him as well.
Brilliant.
Just very nice finish generally, but for him this season when he's been so bereft of confidence.
So I got a message at about midday, which God knows what that time was your time, by the way, Ed. You're doing admin at 3 a.m. or whatever. And it was from Ed, and it said, "Are you planning to watch the Forest game later?" And I was like, because I was kind of half planning to maybe watch a bit of it to see if it was any good, and then, like the rest of the season, probably turn it off after about 20 minutes going, "Oh no, this is the same." But you were like, "No, we should talk about it." I was like, "Okay then, let's do that." So because of you, I spent the full close to 2 hours watching.
Sorry.
That. No, I mean, listen, it's lovely to be here talking to you about it.
I mean, by the way, how are you? How's the year been since we last talked on this podcast?
What I was going to say is, it's not lovely to be here talking to you about it. It's just lovely to be here talking to you. Yeah, all good. We did one at the end of the season, right? I feel like we did an end of the season one, but that's a long time ago now.
It is.
And I definitely didn't do any. I wasn't around for a preview or anything before the season started. I haven't talked about transfers or anything. Yeah, I'm good, man. Like, all good. Life is good. I only watch United when I want to. Such an incredible luxury after all these years of
being forced to
not only watch. Yeah, exactly. Being forced to by your friends to talk about it on the internet. Yeah, how are you?
All good. Yeah, I mean, fairly quiet Christmas, and I'm not sure we have any real mega plans for New Year's.
Did you do exciting birthday things for anyone in the family, given they were all in the same window?
Went out, hit some bars, got some fried chicken yesterday. Exciting stuff.
Boo. I feel obliged to say boo on behalf of my public image. Great. It's been lovely Christmas here. I had a Christmas tree, like an actual real Christmas tree. And for many years, everyone's said, "Oh, it's such a pain because they drop all the needles and whatever." I've always had one. I'm like, they're fine. Like, yeah, they drop a few needles or whatever. But this one, this year, in moving it from the inside of the house to the outside of the house, it shed, and this is not an exaggeration, a third of its needles on the way out. It was, if you walk past it, looked at it funny, it was dropping needles on the floor. I am more pine needle than man at this point. So yeah, that's been my Christmas. But otherwise, I love Christmas.
Has that tree been anywhere near Carrington? You just look at it and he gets injured, right?
So I watched the second half of the Villa game the other day, and you're just thinking, like, Garnacho, Rashford, Højlund, is this something? This might be something, especially if McTominay's not in the team behind them. And there's like some actual, and Anthony, that means Anthony's not playing. So you're like, oh, this might be all right. And then, of course, no, sorry, you can't have nice things. You could have Kobe Mainoo for 60 minutes, that's it.
Yeah, not even that. Today.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so maybe we should talk about some of the game. And it seemed to turn, I don't know about you, I don't want to simplify things too much, but it seemed to turn with Erik looking at that first half going, you know what we're really, really missing here? What we're really missing is Scott McTominay.
I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. You don't want to be like reductive about it, obviously. But you really hope, I mean, obviously you don't hope this, but you hope it's for injury reasons that he's taken off Mainoo, because if he took him off because he thought this will make things better tactically, then, sooner he's on, the sooner old Jim Ratcliffe gets his 25% stake and says, sorry, Erik, this is enough to sack you, the better, because that's a really weird decision. I mean, he loves McTominay, right? He's yet another United manager with a slightly bad attitude who absolutely loves Scott McTominay.
I mean, it's just incomprehensible. Not just the substitute, just his love of Scott McTominay. I don't want to pile on the guy. I mean, he seems a perfectly reasonable bloke, right? And he's a good, honest pro and all of that. Except, he's just not honest with all the technical stuff. So I haven't checked out his number of passes because it's getting boring, but I'm going to bet it's not many. Definitely sub 20. I will look at some point during this podcast. But it's just the defending. I mean, he is responsible for 2 goals. Not entirely him, but if you're a defensive midfielder, and that's where he's come on to play, covers the edge of the box, those 2 goals aren't scored.
Well, I was going to say that there's a kind of, this isn't just, well, nobody knows my agendas. Everyone's forgotten. They're all about Wayne Rooney, and he's now the manager of Birmingham City, and I have no feelings about that, so it's fine. But both goals, Manu would have been there or thereabouts, right? Most likely. I mean, the second one in particular is on the counter-attack. The team is very disjointed, and they're pushing for the win, which is a good thing. You want that. And the defence dropped very, very deep in a line. In a way, fun enough, as Gary Neville was relentlessly pointing out, they didn't for the first goal. But yeah, both goals coming from that kind of half uncertain, is this supposed to be the centre-back or the central midfielder? Well, Manu, in his very young career, has been really good at picking up those spots. So,
yep.
I mean, I know he was kind of responsible for one of the goals, one of the Villa goals, wasn't he? But he's been an absolute ray of light in a particularly kind of appalling period of United history.
It's not an original thought, and I did put this into the Rancast OG's WhatsApp group, but I didn't half think of that Wayne Rooney interview on Toffee TV where he says, I'd grown up idolising Big Dunk and all these players, and I got on the pitch with them and I realised these lot of crap. That's Kobe Mainoo coming into the United side, isn't it? Everything's just so easy for him. Man, I mean, I haven't seen the post-match interview, so I don't know if Erik has said anything, so I'm saying this without the knowledge of that. But, absolutely baffling. And it's been such a tough season on the injury front, of which some blame may or may not be put onto Ten Hag and his training regime and the new sports science head and all of that, because it's unusual to get so many, and possibly another 2 today with Rashford and Anthony. Rashford rubbing his groin vigorously and Anthony feeling the back of his thigh, so might have another 2. But it's been a really tough season for Erik from that point of view, but it's kind of exposed, I think, some of his limitations. He seems to have these weird blind spots. Scott McTominay being one of them, but not the only one. The insistence on building up from the back, sometimes, which they do, and then they do it very poorly and then just launch it long anyway, and it's like rinse and repeat on that one, which seems very, very odd.
I like the way it's called building up from the back, when it's no, it's exchanging 3 passes among the centre backs and the goalkeeper, and then it going wrong. That's hoofing it at best, or giving the ball away. I mean, it really felt today like all the goals were going to come from both teams. The goals were going to come from that, and our goal did come from that, obviously.
It did.
Yeah, I mean, they are just not good at. I mean, they're just not good. And it's interesting, sort of, because genuinely, I have watched much less United this season because it's been so joyless, and because of not having to think of things to say about it, I've just kind of chosen to do other things instead a lot of the time. And it's been a particularly busy year anyway so far. So for a whole variety of reasons, I've hardly watched them. And every time I do, it's just that it does feel like Groundhog Day. You're just dipping into the same movie that you've seen before. It's the vibes aren't right. I don't even mean that in terms of the collective mood in the camp or whatever. It's like the tactical vibes aren't right. The ball doesn't come to the right person in the right place nearly often enough. The final ball is just off. It bobbles just wrong. It ends up with Anthony in space, or today a couple of times, and I think his redemption's been great to see, and he's clearly a very fine player. But the ball came out to Wan-Bissaka on the edge of the box 2 or 3 times, and you're like, oh, almost anyone else in the side would have had a really good sight at goal at this point, but that's obviously not his skill set to be. I mean, if he could tackle the ball into the goal, that'd be great. But so it's just that feeling that they're just about to give the ball away at any given moment.
Yeah.
That's what it's like watching them on a kind of casual basis, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you don't half feel like getting all Dave Moyes' reductive tweet over this and saying the passing wasn't good, the defending wasn't good, the attacking wasn't good. Apart from that, it was all great. And
yeah, United need to improve in a number of areas, right? And that was
still,
10 years old this Christmas, that tweet. 10 years old.
Have we improved in any of those areas? Some tactico somewhere will point out that we haven't. Yeah, it is pretty depressing that United had 5 shots on target today, and I was trying to add them up. Wan-Bissaka had 1, Diallo had 1. They were both weak as fuck. Did anyone else have a shot? Who else had a shot on target? Well, Rashford had 1 for the goal, which was a nice one.
Yeah.
Garnacho, second half, did he? Can't remember. It's like hardly
Eriksen?
any.
Was that the Eriksen one that was saved that led to the counter-attack, right?
Right.
That was, yeah.
Right. Talking of coherence in the side, the only thing that really has been successful this season, it's only partially, is the number of the pressing and the high wins. United, before this game and coming into the game, having won the ball something like 190 times high in those, so our attacking third, their defensive third. And it led to 36 shots and 0 goals. Now, today it led to a goal. And I'm pretty sure that's the first this season from the high wins. And so that's one thing that's sort of been working, but it's a tactic that's led to a lot of ball possession and a lot of shots and not very many goals. And you just kind of wonder, well, is that the right thing? And at the same time, with United pressing those 3 players forward to win the ball up the pitch, they've been leaving gaps in midfield, through which teams have over and over again just run through and put pressure on like a pretty disorganized back four. So it's
to go back to the Villa game, which I wish is the one that we decided to do this for, because that would have been a lot more fun. That first 10 minutes, United were doing exactly that in a really in a way that just looked like an absolute nightmare to play against. Because you think Old Trafford properly rocking, Boxing Day night, they're just at you and at you and at you. And as lots of people have said, United didn't feel out of it at 2-0. They felt out of it at 0-0 in this game. They felt out of it at 1-1. It's weird. It was like, I kind of thought United, that's not true. I did think United would win when Rashford scored. I actually did think that for a very short period of time. And then it was like, oh no, of course. Actually, what's going to happen is Forest are going to get what they, I guess, kind of deserved-ish. I don't know. They got a lot of praise on the English television coverage, and it felt like they didn't have to be very good. They just had to avoid calamitous errors, which they did apart from once, and take advantage of their first goal was very good, and Gibbs White's finish was excellent for the second goal. It's a fantastic finish. Although he should have been sent off.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Clearly.
Should we do a diversion into this? Michael Oliver last week.
Yeah, let's do it.
Made up the rule that for one piece of dissent you can get 2 yellow cards. Just completely made up that rule. Previously, Michael Oliver had made up the rule that you can punish one player for a team set of fouls under Herrera, a rule that has never been before or since used. And no one, I don't think, has got 2 cards for the same piece of dissent as Dalot did last week. It gives White clattered into 3 players and then argued with the ref and managed to get himself 1 card.
The thing is, he did exactly what Dalot did, which is go completely mad and then go mad again when the yellow card comes out, thus making it 2 separate acts of dissent. The thing that's amazing about this is I'm almost sure, and I don't know this for sure, But I'm almost sure that Diogo Dalot then got booked for complaining
He did.
that Gibbs White wasn't off when he had previously been. It's glorious. That's a great combination.
I mean, pile of salt, big gaping wound, referee rubbed it in. I mean, look, it's every set of fans thinks the ref's against them. It's just sometimes maybe they are out to get you. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the Herrera one, which we talked a lot about at the time, you can go back to the archives and find that if you want to. So it was very, there was a long, I ended up in a long discussion with a, let's just say, friend of the show about that afterwards, who was extremely insistent that the referee was within his rights. Something that has happened neither before nor since.
Yes.
Anyway,
Well,
that was against Chelsea, right? That was when everyone was kicking Eden Hazard.
yes, I think so. Yeah,
They were rotating fouls on
that's it.
Hazard.
Yeah.
And Herrera was just like picked at random out of a hat because,
yeah.
you know.
Well, the two people who think that was the right call are Dermot Gallagher now in the Sky Sports studio, and that particular friend of the show, whose name we shall not name, and you don't need to tell me because I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, obviously, it could only be one.
Everyone's allowed an opinion, and they're all valid. So
yeah, well, I mean, they're not, are they? Well, if 21st century life has taught us nothing else, it's that not every opinion is equally valid. Anyway, I think it'd be very hard to construct an argument to say that Erik ten Hag is doing a really good job of being Man United manager. From the outside looking in at the discourse, which I really genuinely participate in mostly with you, that's like the extent of my United conversations mostly, it seems to me that there is this kind of view that like nobody could do any better with this mob, which I feel like we as fans surely have a very specific, relatively recent piece of evidence that suggests actually you bring the right vibesman in and we're going to win the next 3 games 5-1 with exactly the same players. Like, if I recall correctly, there were a lot of people saying, what could Mourinho possibly be doing? And then Solskjaer came and won and everyone was came in and everyone was jolly for 3 months. Now, is this a long-term solution? No, but it's more than a marginal gain, Dave Brailsford.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, give it Ollie till the end of the season. That's the move right now.
I mean, it couldn't be worse, could it? If you want just
No, it would be better. Like, that's the thing. I'm not saying they should do it because obviously then you get into the sticky situation of what do you do with him after he's outlasted the good vibes. But he would get way more points than Ten Hag between now and the end of the season.
Or you send him to Saudi Arabia to manage Cristiano Ronaldo, don't you?
Oh dear.
Poor Ollie. Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, you took this mob, quote unquote, and you took them to second, and then you added another £400 million worth of players, and now we're down in 8th. Or 7th.
Well,
seventh. No, to be fair, 7th. It'll be 8th after Brighton and Newcastle win this weekend. Yeah.
There's one very important correction there. You spent £400 million on players. You did not buy £400 million worth of players. Very, very different figures.
No, and there's more than a marginal gain to be made in assessing exactly how it is United have gone after these. I mean, again, broken record, but how exactly have United spent so much money? And Adam Crafton did a very good piece in The Athletic, you may have read last week, sort of breaking down the machinations at United. And it's just like absolutely true. And it's not like you can go point to Murtaugh and go all his fault. It's how they've structured the club and the decision-making processes. And the fact, just for an example, Anthony, who the scouting department valued at about 25 million on their list, and United managed to pay more than 3 times as much for him. And that has knock-on effects because now we're absolutely broke. And the knock-on effect last season is we had to get Sabitzer and Weghorst into the team, who are both absolutely rubbish. And the knock-on effect this season has been to get Amrabat into the team, and he's rubbish as well. And it does have an effect. Like, it's not my money. I don't care. It's Big Sir Jim's now. But he's like, his career in business has absolutely not been marked by wasting money. In fact, he takes toxic assets, combines them together to be more than the value of their parts. And this United team and squad is much, much less than the supposed market value of its parts.
Generates a few toxic assets of his own, though, doesn't he? Hey?
Oh, quite
Hey?
literally. Quite
Hey?
literally, yes.
I'm back, baby. um, um, so the thing about that Laurie Whitwell article with that breakdown, me and you talked about the Antony signing, and it is very reductive. But if you look at his numbers of goals and assists in the Eredivisie, where Memphis Depay, fine player that he is, was banging him in from all angles, where the quality of defending is genuinely, not great. To not be getting big numbers in a title-winning side in the Eredivisie and to come to England for 80, 90 odd million, I mean, that is just baffling. I mean, it is. And he bought Mount too, who is just Antony again, right? Like, for huge money. I mean, I bet Chelsea, well, I was going to say they couldn't believe their luck. It's obviously luck they didn't need, given they could have just sold Mount to Saudi Arabia like everyone else. But, just the idea that another Premier League's going to come in and take this guy off your hands for that kind of money. For one Premier League club to sell a player to another Premier League club for that kind of money, you're just looking at that deal going, well, this just doesn't pass the smell test, right?
No, so many of them don't pass the smell test, yeah. And Chelsea must have been loving it because, like, their strategy is to buy young players from abroad on very long contracts to amortize it over that period. Now, obviously, that loophole's been closed now. And then to sell academy players where you book all the value straight away. And it looks like they're doing a deal for Colin Gallagher, which I'm sure Chelsea fans won't be happy with because he's a very good all-round player. But it will it equates to like £300 million of spending. Now, it does catch up with you eventually. It's not magic money. So in the calculations, it will eventually catch up with you. And there's only so many academy players you can sell. Although, to be fair, Chelsea are quite good at finding academy players to sell, as are City. And we are not, and it's all these things that the Brailsford and INEOS team will be looking at. But it filters down into the team. You get a bunch of dross that you're not quite sure what to do with or wanted out and couldn't get out. Bring the wrong players in. And this is what you get. And then you get a manager who, when times were good, seemed to be putting something together. When times have been bad this season, doesn't seem to have the answers and keeps going back to his one single B plan, which is play Scott McTominay, which I would posit has not worked ever. Maybe for those 5 minutes at the end of the Brentford game, but that's about it.
I remember when Mourinho... in the season we finished 6th and won the Europa League. And it felt like Mourinho was doing something, right? Because won the Charity Shield and then the Carling Cup. We didn't win neither of those competitions were called that, but those are the ones we won. And then we won the UEFA Cup. And then there was a feeling that something was happening. But if you dug into it, nothing was happening, right? Like that we bought Zlatan and he scored loads of goals and that was basically it. Last season, Rashford banging him in, like something decent was happening in the vibes. And then it did look like, okay, we really need a defensive midfielder. Great, they bought a defensive midfielder. We needed a new goalkeeper. They bought a new goalkeeper. We needed a new striker and Højlund seemed like a punt. But actually, that feels like the best of all the transfers from the summer at this point. I mean, we'll see, but he looks to me, what do I know? There looks to be a player in there, as they say. And
somewhere.
He was so happy. He was so happy. It was so nice how happy he was. Mind you, Vegas was really happy when he scored too. So maybe that isn't the only metric I should go by.
Well, yeah. To be fair, Højlund has got 6 goals this season, which is 3 times as many as Wout managed.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, the idea that like Champions League goals count less than Premier League goals is pretty crazy, isn't it? But anyway, the vibes are so far off this season. And, I think the way I care as much about this stuff as I do about the on-pitch stuff, but I think the way he's handled the off-the-pitch stuff is almost the worst thing about all of it. And I saw United fan after United fan giving him a pass. in the summer, saying the club's behaved disgracefully. You can understand Erik wanting a goal scorer of that quality back. I'm like, can you really?
Yeah.
There's the stuff with Anthony, which is very like, who knows who knows in the world what anything is and what's happened where, unless you saw it, you don't know, right? But there's just this horrible, like, there's an icky quality to some of Ten Hag's decisions and positions on things that kind of leaves me a bit disinclined to be super rooting for him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But
by the way, lots of United fans feel like that. It's just they weren't the majority, most vocal. But I think that's I don't think everyone's giving him a pass on that. But yeah, it does. He did feel like a bit icky, and quite a lot actually. The fact that he was just perfectly on board with it and didn't question it for a moment. So seemingly so. I mean, he presumably had been given a briefing by the lawyers because he really didn't want to say anything at all publicly and just kept referring to the club's statement. But yeah, I mean, it's contributed to the vibes, and the fact that he's so into some players who aren't contributing. Some of the others must be looking at it and going, not sure I buy this. I'm sure, right? Whatever's happening on the training field that is resulting in so many muscle injuries, 2 more today by the looks of it. There's got to be something there. I just don't believe it's coincidence. His decision it's the club's decision in the end to give him power over transfers, which is going to end. But his choices of players haven't worked out, pretty much all of them, most of them anyway, a few have. And so, of course, yeah, it's only fair when you lose 14 games before the New Year, that you point at the manager and go, is he doing the right job? You know, and no one, and you wouldn't expect it on this podcast, but no one is saying, oh, well, this is binary as that, right? It's structure of the club, it's decisions around transfers in and out, it's ability to pay the right kind of money, it's decisions around like facilities and training and the manager and vibe, you know, all of this shit all combines into one to make the absolute pile of dung that we see at Old Trafford these days.
Yeah, and you know, even you know, how many times have one of us said the fish rots from the head on the show? Like, how many times have we talked about the limitations that the managers are under? But the various managers in the Glazer era haven't all failed in the same way, I would say. Like, and they haven't all failed to the same extent. And there has been a difference at different periods of time in the level of performance that the managers are getting out of the players. Now, this doesn't change the fact that the culture of the club is clearly, and I don't mean the playing staff really, although there's some weird stuff with the culture in the playing staff, I would say, but the culture of the club is clearly a complete, total and utter disaster. The ownership structure, the decision-making structure. One amazing thing in that article, which I thought about during the West Ham game, was that it was David Moyes who appointed John Murtough.
Yeah.
Just like a little lasting legacy of the Moyes era in the middle of it all. Just very funny to me that. The Jim Ratcliffe, in a way, like, he's got a huge job on his hands, but in the other sense, there's so much upside just by streamlining decision-making processes, right? Like, getting all these blockages out of the way. The Mourinho thing where he had to get approval to have his desk changed. You know, like, there are so many, I keep making stupid marginal gains jokes, but like, there are so many non-marginal gains to be made in the way that you structure the operating of the football side of the business.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
And I think part of that's why Erik will make it to the end of the season. I mean, unless he loses another 5 games next month. I mean, they've lost 5 in December, which is quite remarkable. Remember how bad it was when Louis lost 3 in a row around Christmas a few years back, 10 years ago nearly?
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God.
Norwich and whoever it was. Yeah,
that Norwich game, that remains, in a very tightly contested field, that remains the worst United game in the post-Fergie era. I maintain that that's the worst one.
There's been some crackers. But it's the change of ownership and what is going to happen to the football structure, where they'll will have benefited from the fact that INEOS and their sports team there have made a lot of mistakes. across Lausanne, the club they have in Côte d'Ivoire. I think it's Côte d'Ivoire, and obviously Nice. Lots and lots of mistakes, and have learned that they need to put in the kind of structure that most elite clubs around Europe in order to make the kind of right decisions quickly enough, and they're going to make them all right, but you can get as many as possible right. Combine that with the right coach, and United's spending power should have the club in the best position, a much better position anyway. And so we should be getting the first bit. They could make bad mistakes, but they're going to make them quickly. And I don't think they will go, oh, our scouting team says this player's worth 25 mil. He's on our list somewhere of potentials. Are you going to pay 86 mil for him? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
Yeah. And that would be good if that didn't happen. I mean, I don't have any great faith in the specific individuals that have arrived because they have absolutely no history of success in football. In fact, they have a pretty long legacy of failure in football, as do the people that were bidding in their rival position, it should be said, because they've won a lot of Liga trophies. Well done, he's 13. Like, it's not difficult to win Liga by buying Lionel Messi. I think that on its own will probably do it for you most seasons.
Yeah.
They haven't even won it every season, and there's no other club even slightly competing financially. Like, nobody in the stratosphere. It's not like in England where you've got now 3 clubs. I mean, I don't know where Chelsea's standing is at the moment. Anyway, so it's not like this is a kind of like, oh, if only Qatar had come in with their infinite money and great track record of improving European giants. Like, but the INEOS people, like, if we were a cycling team, you'd be like, oh, well, these lot seem like they're a good cycling team. But they've basically failed repeatedly in the football arena. And it's just, you think all they have to do at United is be reasonably sensible in their decision making, and they're onto a huge winner.
Well, what they did do, so at Lausanne, they put Bob, Big Sir Jim's brother, in charge, which doesn't seem to have worked out very well. They're a club that historically has spent a lot of time in the second division, some in the first. They've won a few titles. They're a mixed bag of a club, but they've been relegated and come back up, and now they're in the bottom 4 or something like that this season. So this is not a great success story. Nice obviously doing very well this season, and they did make a lot of changes behind the scenes, and that's what I'm kind of pointing at as potential learnings that they've made.
Yeah.
But Brailsford, yes, absolutely. To channel my inner Souness, as he said this week, is not a football person. Mind you, I would be, just to wind him up, Souness, I'd be fully in favour of appointing Paul Pogba as director of football. Souness's head would just implode. But so yes, Brailsford isn't. Jean-Claude Blanc is a bit different, and because he was at Paris Saint-Germain, he was at Juventus. 2 great clubs, run really well, no problems with any of them. But he has been around football, so he should understand something. I mean, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is a risk, and I don't think anyone could go, they're definitely going to sort it out and get all the decisions right. But if they make more decisions right, United will be in a better position. I don't think there's miracle money here, and the Qataris wouldn't have done this anyway. I mean, the squad cost rule under the UEFA Profit and Sustainability FFP updated rules is pretty tight. It's a bit more relaxed in the Premier League, but there isn't like a miracle here. Yeah, that equity that INEOS or Ratcliffe or Trawlers Limited are putting into the club, it could go towards FFP. I don't think it will. I think it says it in the SEC filings. It is earmarked for infrastructure development, so Old Trafford and Carrington. That doesn't count towards FFP anyway. They can put as much money, the owners, into that kind of thing as they want. Right, so only 90 of up to 105 million over a 3-year period can be counted towards the squad, and only in England. In Europe, it's a bit different, much tighter. So anyway, all to say, there isn't some kind of miracle thing that can happen with money here. It just has to be better decision making. Right coach, If they decide Erik's the right coach, great. I think we all have a few doubts now, don't we? And just get the right people around him to make the right kind of decisions on ins and outs in the squad to get us into the right position. It sounds simple. It's all a bit reductive, isn't it, when you put it like that? But that's what every other club does.
Yeah, like what business in the world isn't governed by the efficiency of its recruitment, right? Like that's just you get the people who are going to make the decisions. If you get people who make good decisions in positions of power in organizations, the organization flourishes. If you empower those people to have an effect, it's very simple in principle. Of course, what's difficult is, especially in football, is knowing who the right people are, because success is pretty amorphous in football. Like, we can be pretty sure with a very substantial body of evidence behind us that Alex Ferguson is the best football manager that there's ever been. And it's only because he did it over 3 generations in multiple different settings, in different leagues, as football changed, he changed with it. Like, he's the best. We know Alex Ferguson as an individual has a massive bearing, but you only know that for sure in retrospect.
Right.
We could say now, Guardiola, if you've got a bunch of money to spend and you're going to have a team of extremely mega elite footballers, Guardiola would be the best choice by an order of magnitude in the game. These decisions, even in football, even in players where there's so much data behind the kind of that could inform your decision making, cultural fit and just all kind of personal factors, interpersonal factors, like all of these things make a huge difference to whether they'll be a success or not. Jadon Sancho, like the idea that he would end up being the most disastrous signing out of all the disastrous signings that United have made, given the way it's turned out. I don't mean that as a knock against him as a player or a person. I mean the way it's turned out. Nobody would have expected that. So these kinds of decisions are extraordinarily, like, you are by no means guaranteed to get them right. What you want is to be on balance, making better decisions than worse in the long run, right?
You want to translate the noise into clear signals, and United have not done that very well. I mean, finding you should mention Sancho. Of course, there were a few signals there. He stopped training at City, and they were quite happy for him to leave. He was consistently late at Dortmund. He was booted out of the England squad because of apparently a poor attitude in training. And surprise, surprise, apparently had a poor attitude in training under Ten Hag. Now, whether the answer was to get absolutely draconian and ostracize him from the squad, I don't know. And I don't know what impact that's had on other players in the squad and whether they're supportive of that or not. But it's going to have a very substantial impact on United's ability to sell him, for sure, because now he has a reputation that's absolutely in the toilet. And for everybody involved, he needs to leave, clearly. For him, personally, because he needs to get his career back on track, a very talented player who's now, unfortunately, had a few clubs, and the manager just doesn't want to work with him. And so we're not going to get some miracle apology at this point. Jadon goes, okay, I'm really sorry. I noticed this week, just while we're talking on about Jadon Sancho, there were some more social clips of him at a party. And generally speaking, that kind of thing doesn't bother me because it's out of context. He's, he could be training really hard with the reserves and just went to a party with his mates. It's filmed, but it doesn't half wind fans up, that kind of thing. So
that's like, I mean, no. Do continue to do penance, person who's not allowed to do their job. I mean, what do people want of footballers at that? Like,
I know.
What's he supposed to do, man? Like, genuinely, what is he supposed to do?
I mean, he probably doesn't even drink either. And I don't know about you, but I have on plenty of occasions turned up at the office with a stinking hangover. Not fit to do my job properly. So.
I mean, I pretty much quit drinking before I had any responsible jobs, so I've kind of got away with it. But yeah, in principle, absolutely. I mean, I turned up at some of my irresponsible jobs pretty badly. In fact, I once quit a job because me and you stayed up all night playing Football Manager.
I mean, and there's a whole bunch of blokes listening to this going, yeah, sounds reasonable.
It was the 90s. That's all I'm going to say.
The
yeah,
golden era for football and Football Manager, I might add.
I've just been watching the Beckham, I was going to say documentary. I'm going to put documentary in very, very big air quotes, because it is very evidently, absolutely categorically not a documentary. But it's a very, very enjoyable watch. And the 90s United stuff is almost painful to watch. Because, when like, listen, we are both in our 40s. Delete as appropriate between mid and late. And so there is a kind of overwhelming tendency to look back at one's youth with a sort of, rose-tinted, sepia-toned hue. But the thing is, when it comes to United, there is a real, if we hadn't seen such riches, thing that goes on when you watch clips of them, because they look good almost all the time. We used to get so annoyed when they lost 4 games a season.
I know.
Just crazy. Anyway.
When was the last season where United lost 14 games under Fergie? I don't know. Was there ever one? I mean, it would have been back in the 80s for sure, late 80s. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the club is a pale shadow of what it was in the 1990s. And we may have posted record revenues now, but the only people who care about that are the Glazers, because they've been filling their pockets with all those revenues for years and years now. So not anymore. Not anymore. They won't be able to do that. I was picking, by the way, excuse me. By the way, I was picking through the SEC docs again, because I went through them on the last pod, but I really hadn't had.
Yeah, this is what we're here for. This is what we want. We want the granular detail of SEC filings. This is the only podcast that does it.
Well, not quite, actually, anymore. But
okay. Boo to the others.
I know. I started the trend. Everyone copied it.
100%.
There are some gems in there, I've got to say. I mean, there's the main filing doc, 6K, but there's a bunch of other stuff on governance and the transfer of shares agreement, and the agreement between the Glazers. And there's some lovely little gems in there. So one of them I like. So INEOS, or Trawlers Limited, have say over any profits from shares or dividends that are paid out. But reasonable expenses for directors are allowed. So Joel and Avram coming in on their separate private jets will still be on the club's dime. Not happy about that. There's also a provision in there that limits the number of United States citizens appearing on the board, and apparently something to do with, people dug into this, it's something to do with the foreign owners rule. So you have to have a certain amount of non-foreigners or foreigners on the board to be a foreign entity for tax purposes. Anyway, it's like, but I was looking at that. Someone on Twitter pointed out. I was like, "Is that right?" Started digging through it. The governance agreement is really specific around who can transfer shares and to whom, right? And who needs what permission. So transfer meaning sale of shares, passing on, moving into a trust. What happens if Glazers get divorced? Like, really, it's in there. And we can only hope for their partners of these absolute bastards do the right thing in the end and divorce them for all they're worth. But there's provisions around that. Ratcliffe actually has more leeway, again, in the governance agreement, more leeway to transfer his current B shares without converting to A to his descendants, but any family not more distant than a first cousin. So if he's got a grandparent, he can pass it on. Probably unlikely, given he's 70.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would seem unlikely.
That's some going. Yeah.
But yes, not more distant than the first cousin. But for the Glazers, they need permission if it's anyone other than a lineal descendant of Malcolm Glazer. Yeah, uses those terms.
It's succession, isn't it?
It is. It's brilliant. Like, clearly, Jim at some point said, by the way, don't trust these lads. Like, put every provision possible in here. So, by the way, on the last one, I got one thing wrong that Andy Green dropped me a line on email to say, you said this on the pod. Are you sure you're right about that? Where I said fixed price at 33. It's not. It's 33 or above is the price at which the Glazers can drag along Jim into another deal. Like, he's forced to go for a full sale in the next 3 years or not. But as I pointed out in the last...
Could you explain Could you explain the
Yeah.
implications of that?
The implications are if the Glazers get an outside bid for the club for a full sale at $33, they can say to Ratcliffe, you must also be part of this deal. You must also bid. Or they can force him into selling his shares to the new bidder. That's just so they have flexibility, because nobody is going to buy the club full sale with Ratcliffe and all his many, many, many protections that are in this deal otherwise.
Yeah.
But what in reality it means is the Glazers signalling between 18 months and 3 years' time, because there's another checkpoint at 18 months, that they will sell. And Ratcliffe will buy, because who is going to go above $33? It was way overpriced anyway.
Right.
As Ratcliffe has himself acknowledged during the process when he said this is not a rational, buying a football club is not a rational business decision. So anyways, just to say, these SEC docs are good fun to read if you really want to, but there are some gems, very, very specific gems there to protect individuals in certain scenarios, which is quite amusing. So.
I just really like the fact that Andy just emails you when you've made a mistake on the post. Like, what a fact checker to have at your disposal. Yeah. The two best minds in football finance, as far as Man United football finance, as far as I'm concerned, in that email exchange.
We got a few people out there now, like pointing out stuff and going through. I totally forget who it is. It was a chap who did a really brilliant, and I'm going to find the bookmark now because he did a really good job. I can't remember it. I will look for it. Anyway, so there's another guy called Swedish Rumble who breaks down United's finances and governance stuff.
Of course.
Muppeteers are doing a really good job on that too. And I will find the other guy who I kept replying to, and I posted his very long, entertaining thread in which he divided the Glazer family into bastards and super bastards, which had me chuckling quite a bit. You can guess who amongst the Glazer siblings are each of those. And this is very boring. Ollie was right, Esquire, brackets, hostile. Ollie _was_right on Twitter did a great breakdown of the SEC filings. He is, by the looks of it, a contract lawyer, so much more qualified than I am to go and analyse that stuff. But, so yeah, there are a few people out there now breaking down this stuff. And I hope this whole community of people who either looks at the finances or contracts or what's going on with United continue to do this in the Ratcliffe minority ownership to, I think, full ownership era as well, because his feet need to be held to the fire and he needs to be held accountable for what happens at this club. For too long, the club was hidden behind a New York Stock Exchange, Delaware registration and Cayman Islands registration for all its various companies and sub-companies, right? Which means there's not a lot of transparency. And that's not okay. These are community assets. And we need more transparency. And Trawlers Limited being registered in the Isle of Man doesn't really give me a lot of confidence that they're going to be super transparent about their dealings either.
No, I mean, listen, calling it Trawlers Limited, just need to be really honest about this, fully works on me.
Oh, yeah.
It does exactly what it is intended to do to my brain, which is make me go, oh, well, I mean, come on, it'll probably be all right. When they're called Trawlers Limited, they get it. It'll be fine.
As you can see on the YouTube over my right shoulder, maybe your left on the telly, but yes, I have a couple of nods myself to that.
Yes, exactly. And it is basically like every third Twitter account from 2011 had the word trawler in it, didn't it? So yeah, this is, including some of the greats.
Route one, but I like it.
Yeah, it's, yeah. And it was super interesting to hear you talk about the breakdown of how it's all, like, your confidence that this is a full sale. I mean, the deal doesn't really make any sense whatsoever if it's not. It's a very confusing thing to just be like, we, take 25%, pay loads and loads and loads of money for the privilege of running the football club. And if it goes as well as it possibly can, we benefit from a quarter of that. That's a very weird setup, isn't it? So
it is. And there's two centres of power, which, having worked with a lot of senior executives over time, absolutely does not work. Right.
Yeah.
So this is why I had a lot of skepticism It's just there's such a lot of detail about who has control over what and who has what voting rights. Oh, by the way, another gem in the SEC filings, the Glazer parties as one block is specified. There are a block. There's 6 of them. They are named Edward, Brian, Darcy, Joel, Avram, and another one. I always forget one of them. Another one. Edward, Brian, Darcy, Joel, Avram, and some other we don't care about. Whatever. They are the Glazer parties. But within their block, and they obviously have 49 point something % of the shares overall combined, but 70% of the vote right now. Because they've always voted as a block, they actually have a provision in there in which the Glazer parties can vote within themselves to vote as a block. So in theory, 4 of the Glazers could outvote Avram and Joel, and then against their wishes, sell to Trawlers Limited. It would be a new sales agreement. In theory, they've never once not voted together. So I don't expect it at all, but it's in there. So they've obviously at some point gone, there's we need to put it under contract. And that's what I say when I say it's so specific, and I have a little bit more confidence about the bifurcation of power won't come to a really messy end, which it almost certainly would in any other scenario.
Sorry, you just used the word bifurcated and Manchester United in the same sentence.
Warm nostalgic feelings about that, did you?
Yeah, they're my friends. That's all I can say. Those people are my friends. It's hard not to be reasonably optimistic for better days, because at least there is some form of change afoot. Now, what's also, I'm certainly no expert on this, but it seems very clear to me, big spending in January is out of the question, because there isn't the overhead in not the budget as in the operating budget, but the FFP or whatever it is now budget is just, the bank's completely tapped out because they spent untold fortunes on mostly the
yes. Yeah. They tapped out the bank and then the credit card too, sadly.
Yeah.
So yes, big spending seems very, very unlikely unless there's a sale. If they sold Varane and Casemiro to Saudi Arabia, which looks more likely next summer. So the Saudi Pro League has changed the rules, so it's currently 8 players you can have in the squad who are foreigners. Now it's moving to 10, so there'll be more space.
Right.
But I think it's from next season, not this. So it seems unlikely that Varane and Casemiro are heading off this winter. So it just seems unlikely United will do a lot of deals. And it's more likely that they'll bring the new structure in and then they'll start looking at deals for the summer, and that will be the first window under the new regime. By the way, while we're talking about Saudi, El Ittifaq, Steven Gerrard's team have lost 4 on the bounce, and then drew with the bottom team. So, and their mid-tables are under some pressure. And Steven Gerrard now in the 54th best league in the world, failing as a manager yet again. Makes you feel good inside.
Just keeping a little mental note of how Steven Gerrard's getting on.
Yeah.
Paul Scholes needs to get a management. I guess he had that Oldham job for like 6 days or whatever it was. That didn't go very well. But if somehow Scholes could be the best manager out of Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes, that would be absolutely ideal, even though he clearly doesn't actually want to do that. And who can blame him?
Well, can Gerrard keep his job in the Saudi Pro League long enough for Frank Lampard to join him there, which it seems just inevitable, right?
He was clearly one stays, one goes. So Gerrard's got to go. Lampard's got to arrive to take over. I don't make the rules. This is just what happens.
Where does Scholes on the left wing happen in Saudi Pro League terms?
Well, he won't go because he's too left wing for it. Right. So we were, at some point, we've drifted dramatically from talking about the Nottingham Forest game. I was watching the whole thing thinking, I don't remember how to do this. I don't remember how you break down football matches. And then I realised, no, it's not that I don't remember. It's that there's nothing meaningful to say about this football match. Nice Marcus Rashford goal. I want to have a conversation about Marcus Rashford. How much have you talked about it on the podcast? How much have you talked about the scale of drop-off?
Well, I mean, quite a bit, because it's so evident week to week. I mean, I think the challenge is that no one I know or have heard from has the answer as to why there's been that massive drop off. So in the two, so he had brilliant season last season. The 2 seasons prior to that were pretty average, and both of those you had a kind of caveat. He had a foot injury, he had a shoulder injury, he was in and out of treatment, and you could go, okay. Yeah, it was COVID and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It felt like there were a lot of caveats around his level of performance. And we were like, now we've got the real Marcus back, finally, injury-free and in the team every week and scoring goals. And now that looks like the blip, doesn't it? The goals was the blip, and now we've got Marcus back again, the inconsistent player who can score what was a great goal today, first time passed into the net. That's a really high-quality finish. And he looked brighter again against last week against
a couple of assists against Villa, right? Or was it a couple? I don't know, but at least one.
And he just generally looked a bit more confident, a bit more direct. And then today nothing again, and ran off rubbing his groin, so looks like he's pulled something and will be out for a while.
Well, he did the weird backflip as well. It didn't look good, did it?
It landed on his shoulder. Yeah.
So it's very strange. It's just a very strange phenomenon, because I find it really difficult to believe that the good Marcus Rashford is the blip, because we've seen it. It's a cycle that's repeated itself numerous times. And it would be an absolutely fascinating case study to understand really what the mechanics are of what's going on. This is obviously completely speculative, but you do wonder a little bit, like, he always seemed to be very friendly with Jadon Sancho, and you wonder whether like that didn't do him any favors in terms of like his feeling around, but it seems to just go to his decision making. Like, that seems to be where confidence gets him the worst. Like and you can easily understand how it becomes a vicious cycle, that kind of being an elite athlete under that level of pressure, under that level of scrutiny, minor miscues and mistakes are kind of treated with immediate jeers of derision, and then like long reads and people on the internet talking about you, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, that's got to be brutal to be in that loop. And they just feel like there just feels like there's quite a lot of like quite sad human stories at United at the moment, just like stuff of like people whose lives should be going slightly better than they currently are for one reason or another. Anyway.
Well, Dave needs to give you a call, and Paul, marginal gains. Let's get these folks' heads right. So.
Yeah, man. That honestly, like, looking at it from the outside, it really looks like that some of that stuff's needed. Because the game is so much in your head. Because Mourinho left and Solskjaer arrived, and exactly the same players won the next 3 games, 5-1 or whatever it was. I mean, listen, they played very bad teams in those games, which definitely helped. But you get the vibes right, and a lot goes right. And you can understand as well, like, to not be too wishy-washy about this, you can really understand why some discipline was needed too, some boundaries, the sense that the kind of the it's a bit of a free-for-all, and there's loads of player factions and power brokers and all that stuff in the dressing room. You do need a bit of old goal mixed in with it all, but I'm not sure the balance is right No,
and the reports that started coming out to suggest that as well, that some of the players feel like he's perhaps gone a bit didactic, Ten Hag, with the way he is. He's a technocrat. He hasn't got a lot of charisma, and he can't fall back on vibes. So the balance does have to be right, and it doesn't seem to be translating entirely. I mean, one final thing to say about the Forest game, because Forest aren't very good either, by the way. That's why they're right down the bottom of the table and just fired their manager. And when you think that Nuno is the answer, then things are not going right at your club. And so, I think Forest got it right in terms of the tactics, because they realise if they keep it quite tight at the back and break with speed, that is the way you beat United all of the time. And it's happened so often. Whereas Villa decided to play this high line, and United were like, we're just going to get it forward quickly. And it worked over. And I couldn't believe, after it worked so many times in the first half and United hadn't finished it, that they kept doing it
Yeah.
And it was interesting, like perhaps the one occasion this season that Ten Hag has made a really smart tactical decision and explained it afterwards in pushing the fullbacks further forward in order to create that overload in midfield so they could get the ball further forward, was like the one time this season where he's made a big call like that wrong. And probably the one time this season that Unai Emery has been outthought in a game because he's got almost absolutely everything right at Villa. Whereas Ten Hag today made this absolutely baffling decision. Again, I'm saying this without knowing whether Manu came off injured or not, but absolutely baffling. And I think that, of course, that's the thing that everyone looks at this team and goes, how can they be so inconsistent, all of them, and how can the manager be so inconsistent too?
Yeah. Well, tell you what's not inconsistent. Me being on this podcast twice a year without fail, whether we need it or not.
Yes.
I'll be back at the end of the season.
We all need it. For one reason or another. Sorry you had to talk about a defeat.
Oh, no, it's all right. I mean, plenty of experience doing that over the years. And honestly, it's just nice talking to you, Ed.
I mean, if we tossed a coin, one side of the coin saying United defeat, one side of the coin saying maybe a win, maybe a draw this season, it's about 50-50. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was genuinely slightly persuaded that it might be fun to watch this game by the last game. And then as soon as Rasmus wasn't in the starting 11, it's probably not going to be. It's probably going to just be another one of those where Anthony plays. And that if I was doing this podcast regularly, and this is nothing to do with on-pitch stuff, off-pitch stuff. Oh, that might be a terrible Freudian slip. It is entirely to do with on-pitch stuff. And my biggest agenda at the club would be Anthony. Like,
God, he's dreadful.
Honestly. So it's genuinely shocking that he's played so many games for United. And I hear a lot like he works very hard off the ball and that's why Ten Hag liked him. It's like, yeah. Like, that's every single person in the crowd would work really hard off the ball. And what we want is for the elite footballer to be really good with the ball at his feet, especially the attackers. And he just isn't, right? Like, it's not, and he's obviously a much, much better footballer than anyone else in the stadium who isn't on the pitch. Like, to be at that level, you've got to be extraordinary. And he played, he got picked for Brazil regularly. So there must be something that I'm not seeing. But my goodness, Tom in the WhatsApp group, producer Tom, shout out to producer Tom, by the way, the amount of awards that man's won since he stopped in this podcast. We were just really badly holding it back.
That's it. It's like United were holding Ronaldo back. He wasn't winning trophies. He's gone to Saudi Arabia and he's just piling them up every week. No, it's not. That's an unfair comparison. This man's trophy cabinet is much fuller than United's.
Yeah. Anyway, having said all that about all the awards he won, he also said Anthony makes me long for Valencia, which I think is a very, very, very good summation of what it's like watching Anthony. Because I mean, there weren't many more frustrating United players than late period Valencia, but good Valencia would be an absolute dream. But yeah, Anthony makes you long for kind of average Valencia at this point.
Yeah. I mean, he's gone out of fashion, obviously getting to the byline and putting a cross in. But that never happens at United. Not a single player can do that, ever.
No.
So, no. Oh, well, on that cheery note, we've got Wigan next week. I'll probably be back with a midweek pod where I can preview that FA Cup game. But it's been great talking to you, Paul. Sorry you had to come on for a defeat. Next time we talk, it may or may not involve discussion about Erik Ten Hag because he may or may not be in a job. If he loses another 5 games in January, he may well not be.
Give it Ollie till the end of the season. That's my
all right
parting gift.
Thanks a lot for listening, everyone. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.